Hi, everybody. Good evening. So, I had a brief encounter with God when I was just 13. When I learned that my mother was dying because of her addiction to alcohol, I decided to visit a church with a neighborhood friend and family. Their lives seemed blessed enough with Sunday morning church visits followed with brunch. I thought that if I attended church and I prayed to God, He might save my mom. However, when I was 15, my mother passed away, and instead of drawing closer to God, I became angry with Him. I distanced myself from Him for 20 years, not uttering a word in anger or praise. Losing my mom hit me like a tidal wave, crashing into the already shaky foundation of my life. I had just moved out of the house a few months before she passed away. I was sick of watching my mom and dad fight, and by this time, I had met Danny, a 21-year-old who, in my eyes, was the coolest guy I had ever seen. At 15, I fell head over heels for him. Danny wasn't a bad guy. I just found a semi-balance of normalcy between him and his mom in my chaotic life. Unable to bear witness to my mom and dad drowning themselves in whatever troubles they faced, I moved in with them. Until that fateful night when I received the call about my mom. My mom had called 3 times that night, and in my teenage self-absorption, I rushed off the phone without saying I love you. On the last call, the next thing I knew, my dad was calling, crying, asking for a ride to the hospital, so Danny and I immediately left the party. The memories blur between that moment and what happened next. We rushed to the hospital, and that's where they told me it was the end for my mother, that she had fallen so severely that her spine punctured her brain and one of her lungs. The pain of losing her was compounded by the guilt of not expressing my love in that final call. I returned home to my sister's side, and we navigated the stormy waters of grief and dysfunction. The echoes of our conflicts echoed through the walls as my father's stint in jail added another layer to our complex family dynamic. After I graduated high school, my first addiction started. It was an addiction not to substances, but to the intoxicating glamour of easy money and the camaraderie that surrounded it. In the shadows of unresolved pain and anger with my father, I stumbled through the next few years, grappling with the ghosts of the past. The turning point arrived in 2009, marked by an arrest for the distribution of a dangerous drug. To avoid going to jail, desperate, I grabbed my bag of pills from the officer and took a handful. Awakening in a hospital bed, the reality of my choices crashed over me. Police officers, witnesses to my actions, spoke of saving my life. I wondered, was it luck or was this divine intervention? Stepping out into the world again, I was met with the somber gaze of my sister, a silent witness to my journey. Promising to mend my ways, I searched to gain some stability. The job at American Express brought fleeting moments of normalcy, but the allure of independence beckoned. I moved in with a friend, and our lives were all about parties and self-indulgence, fueled by fast money and fleeting friendships. It was only a few months later when I got the call that my father was in hospice, and that this was it for my father, the man I had resented for so many years because I could never figure out how to properly communicate and express what I needed to express to him. I was sick with the pneumonia at the time and torn between family advice. I faced the dilemma of leaving hospice or seeking medical help. I opted to go to the doctor and get medication. And wouldn't you know it, that night I took it all as prescribed was the night that he would pass. The guilt of being asleep during a crucial moment haunted me as I left the hospital, a moment forever etched in regret. Leaving the hospital that day, a hollow ache accompanied my every step. The decision to return to the familiar escape of substance abuse weighed heavy on me. A spiral of self-destruction ensued as I overdosed. But in the 11th hour, a guardian angel, a dear friend, appeared, sensing the danger, rushing me to the hospital. and in the haze of recovery, I couldn't help but wonder if it was God saving me again. But despite still being alive, a deep depression held tight, and the downward spiral continued, accumulating in an arrest that served as a wake-up call. This time I was arrested and unbondable due to my previous charges. I entered the Department of Corrections. The chapter that saw my sister steadfast by my side. Post-incarceration, a stint at Crossroads offered a brief moment of hope before being displaced. The notion that maybe drugs weren't the core issue propelled me forward. Yet the relapse that followed exposed the fragility of that belief. Moving in with my sister, I got a job promotion and a promising relationship, but they were all overshadowed by heartbreak and yet another relapse. In the ebb and flow of life, a coworker emerged from the sidelines, silently witnessing my journey. Jorge, a younger soul with a heart as sweet as honey, became more than a colleague. He became a friend, a confidant, and eventually the love of my life. In the quiet corners of our connection, we started dreaming of a family, a future painted with the hues of our love. It wasn't long before the whispers of parenthood danced around us and the anticipation of our first child, Charlie, filled my heart with joy. Yet life's cruel twists intervened, and the joyous anticipation turned into heart-wrenching sorrow as we faced the harsh reality of a miscarriage. And the dream shattered, exposing my heart to a pain I hadn't known before. In the void left by loss, I stumbled and my foundation wavering. The pain pushed me back into the dark corners of addiction and the familiar embrace of substances and the allure of the streets. Jorge, the unwitting bystander to my inner turmoil, couldn't comprehend the demons that lurked beneath the surface. 6 months later, a glimmer of hope emerged as we discovered we were expecting again. This time, fueled by a desperate determination to get off heroin and save my son, I spun a tale of back pain, of needing medication, but hesitating due to the pregnancy. Jorge, the pillar of support, stood by me as we ventured to the methadone clinic at the crack of dawn. The faint light of the morning mirroring our fragile optimism. The journey to recovery was long, but on July 25th, our beautiful son, Forrest, came into the world. A beacon of light in the shadows of our struggle, and in that moment, the universe seemed to align, and I basked in the glory of having everything I ever yearned for. A loving partner, a precious son. It was total joy and completeness. His name is Forrest. 8 months after Forrest's arrival, the foundation we built on shaky ground began to crumble. Jorge's late-night returns became a harbinger of a looming storm, and the family I so desperately clung to started slipping right through my fingers. Despite my efforts to salvage our connection, it wasn't enough, and the fractures widened, and the inevitable separation unfolded, shattering my world into irreparable fragments. The void left by Jorge's departure became a chasm, and I spiraled once again. Instead of embracing motherhood, I found solace in the cold streets, my role as a mother eclipsed by the shadows of addiction. The descent was swift, leading me back to a familiar place, prison. 4 long years that separated me from my son, Forrest. My sister, tired of my reoccurring poor choices, chose tough love, severing our ties completely. Yet amidst the darkness, threads of connection endured with my brother-in-law, my uncle, and my cousin. They were my lifelines that tethered me to a semi-balance of family amidst the chaos. Upon my release, a surge of determination coursed through my veins, fueled by a newfound readiness to conquer the world and become the mother I had always aspired to be. The day I stepped into freedom held an unexpected surprise. as my sister and brother-in-law came all the way from Texas, greeted me with open arms. To my astonishment, they, along with my aunt and my uncle, had pooled their love and resources to gift me a brand new shiny car. And in that moment, I felt unstoppable, ready to seize the world and make my mark. Little did I realize that my foundation was not yet solid, and an internal brokenness still lingered. About 3 months into my release, another tragedy struck, with a devastating phone call informing me that my uncle had suffered a stroke and wouldn't make it. And once again, I was drowning in guilt and shame, as I hadn't even expressed my gratitude for the car he had bestowed upon me. Lost in my own pursuits, I used this as a justification to relapse into old habits. My downward spiral continued with each passing day, leading me further away from the person I yearned to become. In the throes of a meth-induced psychosis, I believed the world was conspiring against me. Surrounded by the wrong crowd, I experienced physical abuse and the theft of everything I owned, leaving me battered and broken on the roadside. In the depths of despair, I finally cried out to God, questioning why I deserved such suffering. I was blinded by the victim mentality. I failed to see how God could turn darkness into light. Living on the streets became my reality, sleeping in random cars, at bus stops, and resorting to actions that I was not proud of. And at my lowest point, starving and cold, I reached out to a persistent family friend who had been sharing messages of Jesus' love. His advice was so simple: no matter where you are, find the nearest church. Filled with fear and shame, I followed his guidance. Entering the church, paranoia gripped me. I was expecting a setup. Tears flowed uncontrollably during the service as I felt like an outsider in a sea of unfamiliar faces. Towards the end, they invited me for prayer, and I reluctantly stepped into the circle, where they prayed for me, labeling me a lost child in need of the Lord's grace and unconditional love. They spoke of books, of removing my name from some and inscribing it in the book of life. Confused yet hopeful, I whispered Ashley when asked what name I desired, believing I was becoming a new creation in the Lord. Leaving the church, I returned to the streets, but something had shifted within me. I noticed smiles, and I noticed the vibrancy of life all around me. Reflecting on my journey, I saw how God had tried to protect me and guide me. A newfound desire to break free from the chains of addiction and live with integrity stirred within me. I felt a desire to stop using, be kinder to myself, and live with a conscience that refused to steal or manipulate. I wanted to live. I wanted to be a mother to my son. I was still out on the streets, but I could not live the street life anymore. I used to say something just clicked inside of me. But I now know, looking back, it was the Holy Spirit activating inside of me. I got so tired of being on the streets, I decided to go back to that one place I knew I would be safe and get a warm meal and a hot shower. I had been on the run for the past year, so I decided to turn myself in. I got in jail and I requested a Bible. I began to pray and I began to journal to God. I reached out to Pastor Robin, the owner of House of Grace, and we stayed in contact via email. And she encouraged me day after day. I was actually reading the Bible, and get this, understanding it. Feeling the words, the scriptures. I felt God's presence all around me. I felt the hope and honesty of Paul. I felt the grace Jesus gave the woman who wept at his feet. I saw the patience the Lord had with Peter. And I knew this man was going to help me build a solid foundation, built on love, trust, hope, and discipline. But for that very reason, I was shown mercy so that in me, the worst of sinners, Christ Jesus might display his immense patience as an example for those who believe in him and receive eternal life. 1 Timothy 1:16. Today, my life revolves around God. I am living at House of Grace, where I have a beautiful support system. Every morning, I seek his peace and guidance, aligning my actions with his purpose, and acknowledging that he knows me better than I know myself. I found the unconditional love I spent a lifetime searching for. Looking back at all the events that shaped my life that I have shared with you today, I recognize the depth of my past wounds and the importance of expressing love and resolving conflicts before it's too late. Don't wait until tomorrow to say I love you and release the burdens that weigh down your soul and your heart. Let your demons out now, for tomorrow may never come. My life today is still in progress, but I have been blessed with a beautiful job where I can help empower others and thrive. I'm working on my relationship with my son. Even though his father is rightfully weary, I show up every Friday, sober and alive. I have planted a mustard seed of hope with my sister by emailing her monthly update letters. The Lord is opening doors I would have never imagined. Build a solid foundation. Love others to Jesus. Do not judge them, because you never know what someone is going through and how hard they are trying to claw themselves back to life and away from darkness. Just love one another as Jesus would, please. It is not hard to be kind to others and show grace to one another, because you truly never know what someone has gone through and how much your support can mean to them. Thank you.